Hello, bonjour. Today we're in the garden, as you can see. We bought a small olive tree, and so we decided we got it really cheap and thought we'd try and save it because it looked a bit poorly. So now I'm actually putting it in the pot in the polytunnel. First bit of gardening I've done again for a few weeks. I usually do this when I've got to put a plant in. It just makes it easier to get the hole prepared with the pot, and then if we know that it's then going to fit in the hole like that. Duncan's outside, you can hear noises outside. He's outside doing something that you shall see in a minute. I decided to put some, I haven't got any gravel, but I've got a lot of eggshell. It just helps to keep it moist when it's outside. Now in that little bed there, I don't know if I remember showing you last year, but I just keep my tomatoes in there, so I've just loosening the soil up. The tomatoes we bought, they'd been reduced, and I think the trouble is when you buy plants of any sort in a DIY shop here, they're not obliged to water them, so they don't always look after them as well as they'd like. So we bought them in the hope that we could save them. As you see, I decided to wear my knee pads that I've had for years and I always forget, so that I can get on the floor, because otherwise as soon as I start kneeling down I really suffer later on. They're quite handy, these knee pads. I think they're sort of ones you have when you're doing floor tiling. A lot less pressure on the knees. I've got 6 tomatoes all in all. And as you'll see, when they go in, they're a bit limp. I've cut some of the branches off of them just in the hope that we'll be able to save them. If not, I'll just have to go and buy some more. It really weren't very dear, but you can imagine the satisfaction when you do manage to save a plant, that when you haven't paid a lot for it. That's just a little tip I learnt from someone ages ago, and I've never done it. Just dip, give the roots a bit of a soak in the water. Now this is Duncan was putting down what we call bash here. It's not a tarp covering ground cover to cover all the ground that basically to stop the weeds coming through, and there was no point digging it all over because we're going to cover it anyway and it will eventually all just die off. We've done it many times in the garden before. Here Duncan's just cutting holes for the plants so that he can get the bash to hug around the plants. So originally this part of the garden was just going to be like a bit of a woodland area, but you start to realise it was going to take as much work as anywhere else in the garden, to be perfectly honest, because we're not the sort of people who just let it run wild. So Duncan's decided that we could have these 3 beds and it will cut back on the amount of grass cutting, which is awkward anyway, going around those plants without tearing bits of the plants off. So doing this just makes more sense. We've got quite a lot of newish plants, some from last year, some from the year before, and they're taking a while to get going, so it looks like they're quite spread out at the minute, but once they start to grow it'll obviously fill up. I don't know if you can see around the edge there, whether you've seen it in any of my other videos. The edging we're using is made from recycled tyres, and we found it when we was on holiday a couple of years ago, and it's really tough, and it'll last such a long time. And it's pretty easy to put down as well. It comes with like long pegs and holds in place. But it's not going to rot like wood does, and it won't rust like metal does. So we've got high hopes for it, put it that way. You see, it's a bit windy that day. So just saying, it felt like it was going to rain. So we're trying to get some things done before it did rain. The only downside of this bash fabric is that if you do decide to put another plant in, you've got to pull the bark back and cut a hole in it and then plant it, and I just find that a bit too much of a palaver, put it that way. I don't think we'll be putting much more in. As I say, these plants will spread, they will get bigger, so. And as you know, we don't have a lot of water for watering the garden in our garden, so we don't want too much stuff to worry about. The birds were very vocal that afternoon, as you'll see, or hear, should I say. That's the final bed of bash for this bed. Of course, the other benefit of this is when it does get wet, it lets the water through, and it keeps it moist for longer, so they don't dry out. So most of the beds are covered in this now. Just makes life a lot easier. I mean, it's not 100%. You do still get some weeds that manage to find their way through, but they come up a lot easier than they would without it. I'm just checking to see if Duncan wanted any help. At this point, I'm just finishing off planting the tomatoes. I'm having a bit of a tidy up. On this particular afternoon, Duncan found a huge bowl that we'd bought a while ago, promising ourselves to make a water feature in the garden. So we found it, and so we started to construct that as well, which is great. So now we're looking at solar pumps and things like that. There we are. Now this is the bark. We have to buy bags of bark every year at some point to top it up, because it does get broken down by the animals and that. But it's great. We love the smell of it and the look of it, and it's obviously a much more natural look than the bashes. It usually costs anywhere sort of between €5 and €7 a bag. As you can see, it didn't rain after all. The sun started to come out, and so I got my coat on just in case it did decide to rain, but it was okay. If you can see on the left there, Duncan's put some wood in to stop the bark falling through into the potager. We've done that all the way along on the edge of the potager so that it doesn't keep escaping.
This back bit?
Yeah, that's on the slope, so leave it to last. Let's see if we get it right. Do that.
Another bag later or something. Cover
Well,
that bit up.
try this one first. I don't
Yeah, I
use
know,
all
that's
that
what I'm
one there.
saying, later.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't want to put me doing the other one as well.
Now we're on the other bed, on the other side of the garden. Duncan's already prepared these over the last few days. In the background you can see one he did on his own the other day, on the right there. You can just about make out there what the edging is. It's like almost like an L shape, so that it sits nice and flat on the ground, and then you can cover it up with the bark and the bash and everything. So you just literally just see the lip of it. Finally finished. That'll be a lot less weeding, a lot less grass cutting. I only managed to plant a few seeds today because most of them need to go in the ground, and it's threatening cold tonight and tomorrow, so it's going to wait a bit longer. If you notice that the farmers harvested, so we got a bit of a view back for a little while. And that's the last bed. I'm hoping to have a party soon and use the fire pit. See if I can show you the view down the other end now that it's been harvested. There we go. Looks like you've missed some on the edge, Dunk.
Yeah, I think loads.
Some more blossom. Guess some new chairs. As I said in the other video, the tulips were coming out, now they're out. Beautiful colour. Daffodils are obviously gone. Even more blossom on these trees. And the camellia has shed a lot of flowers as usual.